All right, good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Malarski, and you are attending the No Kid Hungry Missouri presentation on the Missouri CACFP application. CACFP stands for the Child Adult Care and Food Program. It is a way for aftercare and schools and other organizations that are qualified to serve after-school meals to children for free. It is administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and here in the state of Missouri, administered by the State Department of Health and Senior Services. I am not an employee of either of those agencies. I am an employee of the University of Missouri, and we have an independent project called No Kid Hungry Missouri that is administered by MU, specifically the MU Center for Health Policy. We're a research and service center based in the School of Medicine, and we work on social determinants of health and other policy research questions. It is also a partnership between MU and the Missouri Family and Community Trust, or MOFACT. They are a network of about 20 or so community partnerships around our state that help with public-private partnerships. The FACT partners wear a number of hats, and some of you may actually be familiar with them. They do things like Meals on Wheels in some places. There's even a community partnership in the Missouri FACT network that does summer meals, which is something that we also cover under No Kid Hungry Missouri. Today's presentation will be about after-school meals, of course, and specifically for schools. So a couple of disclaimers and housekeeping items. We are meeting today over Zoom. This is in webinar mode, so everyone is muted by default. There will come a time toward the middle or the end of our meeting today, if things go according to plan, where we may unmute you and we may actually ask people to kind of speak up. This is a presentation that is geared towards schools. So the CACFP is open to both schools and other organizations, aftercare organizations. Lots of examples, things like Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs can participate in CACFP and in their aftercare program, serve free meals to kids. This presentation is about the state process for schools. No Kid Hungry Missouri is not, by the way, affiliated directly with USDA or the State Department of Health and Senior Services. Again, we're a nonprofit project, and we're here to basically provide grants is the big thing. We provide mini grants to organizations that qualify that are supporting these meals, and peer-to-peer facilitation and other technical assistance as appropriate. Our project is about eliminating child hunger in the state of Missouri, and it's based off a national model that was created about 10 years ago. It basically posits that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we can empower communities to help with child hunger. There's not one way to attack child hunger. There's many different programs, facets, ways you can implement things that can be catered to a community. And so what I like to say is, to the folks that are here in this audience is, your communities better than I ever could. The best thing I can do is help raise awareness and provide you tools for your toolbox so that you and your professional team can take a look at things and tailor things that are both, of course, compliant with policy, compliant with the law, but also that makes sense for your community. And I've been on this project now for almost 3 years. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat, and it kind of gives me a great deal of personal value, kind of seeing how some of you and the organizations that you represent have in a very innovative way gone about the business of feeding children. So again, today's presentation is for schools. That doesn't mean that schools are the only ones that can participate in CACFP. And it's mostly for schools that are doing this for the first time. Again, we don't want to waste anybody's time with that. I'll highlight this toward the end of the presentation. I also want to highlight our grants. So No Kid Hungry, we give out small grants throughout the year for organizations that are either increasing participation in school breakfast, serving after-school meals, or increasing participation in after-school meals, and the same with summer meals. So I bring that up because right now we do have an open grant for this work that we're about to talk about today. So if you are a school that is participating in CACFP or about to participate in CACFP, especially if you're launching CACFP service for the first time, I want you to be aware of our grant that we have for after-school grants. So again, this is up to $5,000. Any CAC participant can apply. The only hard and fast rule we have with our grant money is that it cannot be used to buy actual food. That is the reason for that is because our project is designed to incentivize sustainability. In other words, we want to put grant money into work that is likely to last and have a lasting effect for Missouri's children. So if we were buying actual food, then that wouldn't have as much lasting power as, say, equipment or training or marketing your program. Also, again, if the robot didn't tell us at the beginning, this meeting is being recorded, and we'll have some follow-up items for folks after the presentation. I'll send these slides out as well. If you have a problem with being recorded, then you might want to duck out or just not speak up. Okay. So some background about Missouri CACFP. Again, CACFP stands for the Child and Adult Care Food Program. It is available to most schools and nonprofits in the state of Missouri. There's an application process for it to qualify for CACFP, to serve free meals to kids and get USDA reimbursements. That's how this program works. Just like school lunch, you serve a number of meals, you report how many meals you're serving to the state of Missouri, and then the state of Missouri pays. It goes through, it's federal money, but it goes through the state, pays you a reimbursement rate. The reimbursement rate for CACFP is fairly generous, comparatively speaking. For that reason, it can make economic sense for a lot of schools to do so, particularly if you have after-school activities or enriching activities going on campus after school. It's where, in fact, that's a requirement of the program, is there has to be some kind of enriching or educational activity. In most years, there's a second qualification to do this, that's known as area eligibility. And long story short, what that means is that where you're proposing to serve CACFP meals, where you're proposing to serve meals to kids, is in an area that the USDA considers through an established system to be high need or vulnerable, then that's a qualifier, and that qualifies you. And if you're not in one of those areas, and in most cases you can't. But this year is different. This year there is a waiver in place until June 30th, 2022, that makes it so that area eligibility is waived, and that was fairly recently put in. But we, again, at this time, we know it's a waiver, it's temporary, it expires June 30th, 2022. Without that waiver, there is an area eligibility component to CACFP. So if you're a school and you're looking to serve after school meals, you're looking to serve some kind of snack or 5-component, what's called a supper, after school, and there's no waiver in place, and then you're not in an area that's eligible. And again, and to define that further, that means you're in the area of attendance of a school that is 50% or higher, free or reduced enrollment. Then the option for schools that are not area eligible in a normal year, if we were talking to them, would probably be the snack program under the National School Lunch Program, which does allow serving a 2-component meal. But this year, again, because of the waiver, area eligibility is not just for this year a factor. You do apply, if you're doing this again, to collect those reimbursements and to be part of this program, and coincidentally to qualify for our grant, you go through the state application process. This is an online application. Excuse me, it's available online. You can download it and fill it out. But it is available online through the Missouri Health and Senior Services website. And if you just Google health.mo.gov and put a space and put CACFP, I find this is usually, if not the top Google result, it's like one of the top 3. Is this page, the splash page that you're seeing on your screen. It goes over the eligibility requirements in much more detail than I just did. And it goes through some instructions on how to apply. And one thing I like about this page, and I want to highlight on this slide, is if you look in the lower right corner of the screenshot, that is the contact information for the Bureau of Community Food and Nutrition Assistance within DHSS, within the Department of Health and Senior Services. And this is a team of folks that are experts in CACFP and experts in the totality of this application process. And particularly when folks have really complex questions, when people have really complex questions, they can be a great help. Just if I could take a moment, on that for a second, looking at this whole process from the view from 50,000 feet, ultimately, and when we work with schools that are at No Kid Hungry, Missouri, when we work with schools that are doing this for the first time, it's often a dialogue between the district or the school, if it's just a school doing it, and the state. One of the big fallacies that we sometimes run into in the beginning is what I call they're not going to bite you rule, right? When we all have different states of comfort when we're doing something for the first time, after school meals are chronically underutilized, or have been in the last 5-10 years, have been chronically underused in the state of Missouri. There's still a lot of lack of awareness out there about after school meals. And when we work with folks one-on-one who are doing this application, there's often a lot of anxiety up front about the process. And there's this myth that if you fill out something wrong, that automatically means that you're dead in the water and you're not going to have meals for your kids. And that's almost never the case. I've never encountered that being the case. In most cases, when we're working with schools and there's a question that comes up, they ask the state, and there's again a dialogue back and forth. The state is responsible for reviewing your plan and making sure that it is compliant with federal and state policy, and they take that work very seriously and should. But it's also a fallacy to think that you're going to get in trouble if you have questions or something's not exactly right the first time you submit a form. So again, that's sort of my attempt at saying, don't be shy. It's okay to email the team at CFNA and ask them questions if you have them. Okay, so this is a multi-part application. It has 3 initial main forms. And kind of to explain those forms, I have to go over a little bit of the system a bit. So if your school is familiar with summer meals, particularly with the summer food and summer food service program, you'll be familiar with this logic. But CACFP is similar to SFSP in that there is a sponsor site system. So you can be both a sponsor and a site, but in order to be a site, you have to have a sponsor. The sponsor is is an entity that is responsible for turning in monthly reports to the state, collecting the revenue from the state, making sure everybody's in compliance. There's a number of other responsibilities that are detailed in the application. And then a site is the physical location where the food is being served, and that can be another entity or it can be the same entity. Again, just practically speaking, day to day, the situation we see most often at No Kid Hungry, Missouri lately is the school district acts as a sponsor and the different school buildings act as sites. So the school district where my daughter attends, the district is a CACFP sponsor, and 4 of their schools are registered as CACFP sites with the state. And to dovetail on what we're about to talk about, excuse me, there's 3 forms. The first one, that's 3 main forms, excuse me, in the state application process. The first one is for your sponsor entity. The second one is for sites, and there'll be a copy of the site application filled out for every individual site. So if you're a district and you have 5 buildings, and each one of those 5 buildings are going to be serving after school meals, in most cases you will fill out 1 CACFP sponsor application and 5 CACFP site applications. And then the third form is the budget form, and that is again for the overall operation. That's done from in the scenario that I'm talking about. That's done from the district's perspective. So we'll dive into the first form, and again, this is just kind of going over some basic things. The sponsor application looks like this. It's 5 pages. And the first and again, it just kind of asks you some basic info. What's your organization? Are you newly reapplying, and so on? Because it's from the perspective of the school, there is not a Secretary of State charter number. And so you skip that. There you do fill out the mailing address and everything as it says so here on this slide. By the way, I forgot to do this when I was going over housekeeping items in the beginning, but if you do have a question, or if there's something burning, or if I goof up and say something wrong, there is a chat window in Zoom that you can access at the bottom of your screen, and just go ahead and click that and type away. So this is the first page. Sorry about that. This is the first page of the CACFP sponsor application, and the first kind of not applicable question is going to be that Secretary of State charter number. That does not apply to schools. You'll be asked who the responsible individual is. Typically, that's the main contact for the state. It's usually the superintendent. The food program contact, that is usually your food service director. If you are working with a food vendor, and it looks like from the signups to this webinar, many of you are, then that's okay. Just you can put the food service director's email for and it doesn't have to say anytown.edu. It can say whatever the food management company is. That's okay. Financial contact is going to be the person who answers questions about your proposed budget for the program. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but CACFP wants you to think about this as a venture in and of itself in some ways. And once you kind of think, it wants you to think through who you're going to be serving and when, and how much revenue is going to go into that venture, and how much time is going to go into that venture. We'll go into those details a little bit later. But these financial questions, they're going to, the application calls for a point person to that. These can all, by the way, be the same person. If it's a very small district, we've seen that before. All right, this other section, this brings me a bit of nostalgia when I first started on the project in early 2019, and we met with the folks at CFNA. This was the first question I got wrong when I was pretending to be a superintendent of schools. So I guess it's probably good that I'm not one. But I thought, when you look at this first question, at least me, I thought a school district is a government entity. But in the context of the application, no, your schools and school districts should put school. The second question, the sponsoring type, is different depending upon how you're doing things and how many buildings you have that are going to be serving CACFP. So if you are a 1-building district, and we do have plenty of those in Missouri, you'll click, you won't do what the slide says. You'll click independent sponsor because you only have 1 site. But in most cases, we find, again, it's the district wants to serve at multiple buildings, and so you would put sponsoring organization. By the way, we talked about area eligibility a second ago. But it's worth talking about that. In most cases, in a lot of cases, particularly with smaller or mid-sized districts, if one building is eligible, is area eligible, is over that 50%, in a lot of cases, most if not all the rest of the district is. And it's kind of tricky when you think about area eligibility, but it's based off of any site that is within the area of attendance of a school that is 50% or higher. And most of the small and mid-sized school districts that I've encountered in our state have 3 buildings. They have an elementary, a middle, and a high. And usually the elementary school is above 50. Again, it depends on the district, but you have almost an inverse pyramid where the elementary is over 50%, the middle school is maybe right on the fence, and the high school is below. And looking at that, some folks think, well, the high school and the high school is not eligible and the middle school is only a maybe. Not so, because both of those buildings are in the area of attendance of the elementary school. So in other words, if you have a district where where all the schools for one age of eligibility are over 50%, by the logic of how the program works, that means the district is. Right? It's like if Harry Potter, I don't know if you guys have kids that read the Harry Potter books, but if Harry Potter was sleeping under the staircase of a high school that's at 45%, it doesn't matter so long as there's an elementary school in town that the high school building is within the boundaries of that is over 50%. Harry Potter can still eat after school meals at the high school. So anyway, that's some of the thinking we might consider when considering one building or more than one building or area eligibility. And again, all that all that kind of goes out the window this year, right, because of the waivers. But if we're thinking about these things long term, and our project is about thinking about things long term, you still want to you still want to educate yourself about area eligibility and how that might factor into what we're doing. Okay, in a school district, all the buildings are going to be legal entities of the sponsor. Missouri does. And if there's people who are more knowledgeable, please chime in. In Missouri, we have not yet encountered a school district that does donated commodities. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but the reason why this slide is marked up that in this way is because in 2019 there were none that we knew about, and they're kind of rare. So only if you have a district or a school that is using donated commodities, this might be different for you, but in most cases the answer is no in Missouri so far. Most schools have a July-June fiscal year, and the rest of the slide is self-explanatory. Okay, page 2 has a couple of non-applicables for schools, particularly here in the upper left corner, so CACFP, just to back up a second, there are different aspects of CACFP. One example is in Head Start centers. They serve under a different aspect of CACFP. The presentation and the grant funds the at-risk after-school facet of CACFP. And in the at-risk after-school facet of CACFP, which most schools, again, would be interested in looking into, it's an area eligibility system, not an individual eligibility system. And because it's not an individual eligibility system, there is no income eligibility form for this aspect of CACFP. And so you can put NA. Okay, so there has to be somebody officially certifying the claims when you send them in. These next couple of questions are about your meal plan, and I kind of alluded to this before. You will during this application and planning process, just like you would for school breakfast, school lunch, and other nutrition programs you have in your school buildings, there's going to want to be a plan for things like who's the point of contact if that person's not available, who trains your servers in nutrition safety, how are you going to track meals, how are we going to make sure it's a congregate environment with an enriching or educational activity. And again, sometimes these plans are a dialogue. Sometimes there'll be questions from your state reviewer about, okay, well, maybe we need a little more detail on this, and that's not a showstopper. That's just the kind of to plan these things so that they're effective. We want this to effectively feed children. The next few questions are about disqualifications and malfeasance. In 99% of the cases, the answer is no. And we did want to clarify that this is for people who are currently employed, not former employees. For programs where your school has participated recently, you list the nutrition ones and any federal and state grants. The executive director is the superintendent. The chairperson is the board president. People who watch too much TV like me will see my former supervisor's little reference to the television show Parks and Recreation on this slide. Okay, for the civil rights review, this is demographics information about the proposed student population that you're serving. This is because this is, again, we have a sponsor site system. If you are just serving in one building, then you're answering this question for one building. If you're serving it in multiple buildings, these questions are for your district demographics. A lot of times we get asked, how do I know how many kids are going to participate in the after school meals? And that does kind of venture into the territory of, communities usually know their communities better than we do. But I can say just from experience that if your district is a 4-day-a-week district and you have an enrichment period at the end of your school day, and transportation is picking up those kids after that enrichment period, and you've already worked this out with the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri has okayed that. And I'll say that has happened for several 4-day districts in our state. The CACFP is very popular among the 4-day districts for kind of those reasons. But again, if you have that plan that's all approved by the state, then your participation is kind of close to your lunch participation because the kids are there. If you have a model where transportation is picking up kids after the bell, and then after the bell you have your club activities happening, like your marching band and your chess club and so on, then usually what schools do is they look at their enrollment for those activities. So if it's marching band and chess club are going to be there on average every day, and this is how many kids we have enrolled in those activities, that's a good way to start. And then finally, probably the weakest predictor is sort of the national No Kid Hungry benchmark. So No Kid Hungry, which is founded by a nonprofit called Share Our Strength, they came up with a goal of 20%. The equivalent of 20% of your free and reduced enrollment for a building is about what you'd expect to participate in after-school meals. But again, please take that with a grain of salt. That those numbers, I don't know if they're based off any kind of research estimate. But again, if you're a 4-day-a-week district and the buses haven't picked up the kids when you're serving the CACFP meals, you're probably, what we've seen is those districts tend to have close to 100% participation. And and using your existing club enrollment, at least at first, can also be a good indicator. And then page 3 is a bunch of yes or no questions. For school applicants, we worked this out, that this little bottom half, and I will be sharing these slides, this little bottom half are pretty consistently answered this way for schools. Your governing board, to kind of go up here to the 1, 2, 3, 4, but the 5th question on the side, does your organization have a governing board? Yes, that is your school board. And school board presidents are asked to sign these. Sometimes this means timing your timetable around school board meetings, by the way. This bottom of the page on page 3 is how to send the application. You can, if you're a wizard with Adobe, I am not, you can email it or you can fax it. Page 4 is about your services. Again, most schools will have a governing board. Most will not, don't have board members that own school property. Here is where you put in your days of service. A couple things that I haven't mentioned about CACFP. CACFP can be served on snow days, teacher work days, school holidays. You are limited to how many meals you can serve. That's in the manual. You're not limited to actual school days only for CACFP. You are limited to the school year under normal circumstances. The activity I didn't mention when we were talking about activities earlier. The regulators will look for what's called the qualifying activity. And that activity cannot be exclusive to students based on ability. So the most common example of that rule is varsity sports cannot in and of themselves be the qualifying activity for CACFP. Usually, however, if there is already a qualifying activity on campus, such as something like a chess club or open tutoring or something that doesn't exclude students by ability, then the site is open to all students. The site is open to all individuals 18 and under. So a common scenario is that there's varsity sports happening on campus. This is, Missouri, and we love our varsity sports. It's happening on campus, but there's another activity on campus that is the qualifier, and the athletes importantly can eat. Okay. Anyway, that's a bit of a disclaimer when we're thinking about educational enriching activities after school. The for-profit and licensing questions do not apply to schools, and you can skip them or write NA. Okay, so the staff member responsibility section, I want to talk about that. Again, income eligibility forms do not apply to schools because it's an area. CACFP at-risk after school is an area eligibility system and not an individual eligibility system. They do want to have names of staff members responsible for some of these tasks. You do have to, allocate some time for monitoring. And the default value in that third column, we were told, is a 1. Okay. Monitoring and reviews. Most of these questions are yes. You're agreeing to monitor to undergo monitoring and reviewing on a regular basis, just like any nutrition program. One thing to kind of keep in mind in the context of this application form is this is one application form for different entities. So, schools are fortunate in a way in that they are already familiar with nutrition. Non-schools who are going about CACFP for the first time, they're having to think about some of these nutrition and inspection facets of the program for the first time. Training has to be offered regularly. The infant meal pattern requirements are an important non-yes to this for most schools. Only if you have a daycare on site would you answer yes to that. Okay, once again, it gives you instructions on how to turn it in. Definitely want to make sure that the person who is filling out the information for the contact point is going to be staying with you. And you want to notify the state as soon as possible if one of your contact people does leave your organization and you need to refer to another one. Okay, so that's the sponsor application. There's also this checklist of other things that you'll need to do. You'll need to have a sample menu template. There'll be training. There'll be an inspection. We are told informally that the process to getting up and running to be a CACFP sponsor is anywhere between 1 and 3 months. Fortunately, you are allowed to apply for CACFP sponsor status throughout the year. If you're familiar with SFSP, you'll note that that's different. SFSP, there's a window. in order to be, serving for a particular summer. You have to get your application in at a certain time. CACFP applications can be accepted year round. And just to kind of emphasize my No Kid Hungry Missouri hat a little bit here, we will work with you throughout the year. And although we don't have firm announcements to when funding will be available, the funding for after-school meals that's available right now, we may have funding to offer that in the middle of the year as well. I only say that because we have done that before, and we do that because we know that so many of y'all are juggling so many balls in the air, and just, again, for a lot of schools, this is new, and sometimes that decision is made, during the year that, okay, maybe we want to pilot after school meals this year, in one or two buildings, see how it goes, and then we'll have a better frame of reference for next year, and we'll be more used to the paperwork. That's okay. So anyway, okay, there are some obligations to get up and running as a CACFP sponsor. This checklist illustrates some of that. Okay, so the next form is the site form. Again, you'll have to fill out one of these for every building you're serving in. In this case, the institution is the site. This section 2 can be a little tricky because this is at-risk after school. All the students are free, so you put in a number for the free population only. There are no reduced or paid meals under CACFP at-risk after school if all the other requirements met. If you're area eligible and you have an enriching educational activity and you're approved by the state, all those meals are free to students. Reimbursement rate is, I don't have it in front of me, reimbursement rate is around $1 for the 2-component snack and about $3.75, maybe a little north of that, for the 5-component supper meals. And you have to comply with USDA nutrition standards. There has to be a milk, fruit or vegetable, grain, and a meat or meat alternate. But they're free to students. Again, this is the person responsible for the application. And then the center contact or center director is who's going to be there to talk to whoever comes to the site for a site inspection. This is an at-risk after, we're in this presentation, we're talking about at-risk after school. This part of the form kind of alludes to some of the other facets of CACFP, but this is yours. Okay, page 2. Most schools are not a licensed child center. There are some exceptions. This part's pretty self-explanatory. The months out of the year that you're operating, note that you don't serve CACFP during the summer. And age ranges. So age ranges are kind of important under federal, are interesting, at least to me, because under federal policy, an open CACFP site that is, again, up and running, compliant, they can serve any kid. So I have a daughter who is she'll be 14 next month. Her school was her middle school was serving CACFP snack. Her brother is older and occasionally will come pick her up from school. I don't know that he ever did this, but under USDA rules, he's only 18. It's an open CACFP site. He could ask for a meal under USDA rules. So kind of thinking about those different audiences, thinking about I was asked recently about visiting away teams for sporting events, events where you have families coming, like an open house night or a carnival night. Sometimes they can be CACFP sites. Again, all this individual cases you should talk to your contact with the state. But the age requirement, the age facet of federal policy in this program is fairly open, and it's something to kind of think about when you're thinking about your program. Okay, next question is, the next few questions are not applicable. There's no schools don't have the same kind of licensing requirements that aftercare organizations have for this kind of program. All right. Okay. The qualifying school this is a little tricky on section 6. We're told you list the qualifying school. So in that Harry Potter staircase scenario that I listed, you want to list the school that your site is in attendance of that qualifies you. So if that's not your school, then just kind of keep that in mind. Again, most small districts with just the 3 schools in each level, the most common scenario is elementary is the qualifying school because it's over 50%. But to spell out that rule, you're looking for that school that you are in the area attendance of, and that's over 50% free and reduced enrollment. Next, this section is for for-profit centers only, so we skip it as an at-risk after school. Meal service is fairly self-explanatory. Notice that there's classifications for the meals. In most cases, most schools are serving supper or PM snack. Okay, and this is, I believe, the final page, if not the site application. Here's where you start listing your vendor if you have one. Size of the district's contract with the vendor, and the name of that vendor. No schools operate a pricing program, so that is you check non-pricing program. One of my former bosses called Meeby Weeby. Is it a minority or women-owned enterprise? That's a different system for schools, so schools select no for that. All right, so this is the civil rights review part of the site application. It looks almost identical to the one in the sponsor application, but here's where you answer the questions, for the specific building. And again, if you're a 1-building district, these 2 questions are going to be identical for you, but in many cases it won't be. And this is the demographics for who you expect to be participating. Okay, and this is just some acknowledgements, and the site director fills out one part, and the school board president, whoever is listing the sponsor application, fills out the left part. And you turn it into the same entity. It ultimately goes to the Bureau of Community Food and Nutrition Assistance at Department of Health and Senior Services. All right, so the final form is the budget document. And again, this is where you kind of think about, the after-school meals program as an enterprise, what's going in and what's coming out. Your income is going to be just kind of flash forward a second. Your income is going to be that reimbursement. That there's a CACFP reimbursement mechanism that you're paid a certain amount per meal. Okay, this is just the content information for you is what's put up top, whoever's completing the budget document. Sometimes that's a bookkeeper, sometimes that's your nutrition director. A lot of times it's the nutrition director working with the bookkeeper. You are making monthly estimates for this form. So sometimes these monetary amounts are available on an annual basis. I worked with one district and we were dividing by 12 a lot. I should say, for this part of the form. Administrative labor is almost never a factor. In fact, we've never encountered it where it is a factor. With schools, there may be exceptions, but ultimately what you're doing with this part of the form is thinking about who's working on the after-school meal service and about how much of their time is being devoted to that. Utilities, food service supplies, all that is within the lens of the after-school meal service. So we're not being asked to look at the total nutrition program. And it is okay to estimate. You just want to estimate based on evidence. All right. So let me stop the screen sharing. Thank you. Okay, so screen sharing is stopped. Nope, stop. Sorry about that. Okay, wait, we got quite a full room. I don't Fortunately, I don't think anybody's muted. Oh, wait, no, we are muted. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I am sure I missed some things, and there are some very, very, very smart people in this room who have gone through this process and have very effective programs in their schools. So I'm just wondering if anybody, ran into maybe some snags in the beginning, or thought, maybe on the other side, there was something they thought would be really hard and wasn't. What advice can you give for your colleagues in terms of this process? Any general questions, I should say, before we get into stuff like that.
Jeremy, can you hear me? This is Tanya Harvey.
Hi, Tanya.
Hi. So I am the At-Risk After School Program Manager, and with the state of Missouri. So I was just listening, and I'm here for any questions that you might have that might be a little more difficult for Jeremy, just because I do it every day. But some things when he was going through the slides, cash in lieu for CACFP, you always have to say government cash in lieu instead of commodities, because we don't do CACFP commodities, period. So if you mark anything else, we're going to default back to cash in lieu. And like he was saying, you must provide an enrichment. So even if you're going to serve weekends or holidays, you must have an enrichment activity that you're giving to the students. So weekends and holidays are allowed, and you can do any meal or snack on those weekends and holidays. So after school has to be a supper and a snack. If you're going to do two, it can just be a supper, it can just be a snack, but it can only be a supper and a snack during the week. And then on weekends, it can be any meal and any snack. So you could do a breakfast and a snack, or a lunch and an AM snack on weekends and holidays. So that's something to keep in mind, but you still have to give some sort of enrichment program for all of those kids. If you are, like he mentioned, some older, like if you're an 18-year-old picking up a kiddo from elementary, it is perfectly fine to give them those meals, like he said, but you still need to mark them into attendance. So that might be something that they might balk at, like, why do I gotta give you my name? But it's a rule for CACFP that you have attendance records. And then let's see, on the income page of the budget, we want to not just your CACFP income that you're expecting, but any grants that you have. So if you're getting summer food, put that in there. If you're getting National School Lunch Program, put that in there. Any others can be like bulked into one. I don't need them all listed, because some schools have like 50 grants. I don't need all of those, but just a general, I have grants and this is how much I get a month for those grants. And then administrative labor on that budget also, you would want to have, not everybody charges us for their administrative labor. So that's any cost of paperwork. But there are some schools that do have one secretary, and they'll use some of her salary, some of our funds to cover her salary, and that's perfectly fine. You can put that in there. So I just wanted to kind of go over that. Those were some notes I was jotting down while we were going through it, and I'm here for questions if anybody needs me.
Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate you keeping me honest. One thing I'll just shamelessly plug, since Tanya mentioned grants, is our after-school grant. So after this meeting, I will send out a follow-up email. If you attended our general session earlier this month, it'll be the same thing. I'm just going to send an email with the slides and some follow-up items. Among those follow-up items will be the grant that No Kid Hungry Missouri has available to entities that are going to serve CACFP for this coming school year. I will tell you again, just anecdotally, and hopefully this doesn't get too touchy-feely, this is the aspect of this project that I feel has had just the greatest amount of visible impact for me, for my two subjective eyes. Just looking at how it has, and I'm not exaggerating, I don't exaggerate on this sort of thing. It has transformed some campuses in our state for the better. Just kids that did not have access to good nutritional food in the afternoon now do. In some cases, it has made the school more of a community. It has brought the nutrition professionals closer to the school community in some cases, and it's just really turned things. In a lot of cases, it's really made a difference. And also in terms of the numbers, it's where participation has increased the most since this project was founded. Now, it doesn't mean that this project isn't responsible for that. I'm sure there's lots of other factors. You can't just look at data and say that affected that very easily. But I do think it speaks to the lack of awareness. And if some, we recognize in this project that communities are different, and budgets are different, and school staffs are different. Whether something works in your community, the same thing may not work in every community, but it has in some. In some places, the CACFP has definitely worked. It has been revenue neutral or revenue positive. It has been a good service for the students, and it has made people happier about their school community. Okay, getting a couple questions in the chat. Oh, and Tanya answered one of them in the chat. Thank you, Tanya. So I'm just going to read them aloud for those of you who aren't looking, who maybe don't have the chat window, or maybe you're sharing the presentation with the team. We were asked on holidays and weekends, excuse me, can it be breakfast and lunch, or only a primary meal plus snack? The answer: all holidays, including weekends, and all days, including weekends and holidays, can only be one meal and one snack per day. On weekends, it must be served on weekdays. It must be served at the end of the school day. Question: is it possible for out-of-town teams that would be at our school for an evening game to receive the after-school meal? We serve CACFP supper. Answer: the visiting team can receive the meal as long as you take attendance and have some sort of enrichment that they can participate in. Okay. All right. Again, important dates, and these will be on the email. August 2nd is the deadline for the No Kid Hungry After School Meals Grant. Award ceiling of up to $5,000. The only restriction with the actual purchase is that it cannot be for food. However, we will prioritize those districts that are proposing something that's more or less that's sustainable, and we also evaluate districts based on how much what their plan is, and whether how detailed their plan is. Schools, for whatever reason, have tended to be kind of shy about this program. It's just in the kind of the coverage, just looking around. When I first started with No Kid Hungry, if you just started digging into after school meals, a lot of the articles and literature they focus on nonprofit aftercares, which are fun. I mean, those are great services, and I wish there were more of them. But sometimes it gets lost in the weeds that schools can do this too, and schools have an advantage in that they already have nutrition services there on campus. There are some hoops to jump through. This can be, a lengthy process. I hope I can disabuse people. Hopefully, if this is not something that you apply and you're ready to serve the next day, but when you consider the service that is being done for the students, and how it is, and the economic sustainability of it, and the fact that you have, hopefully at this point, some support for as you dive down the rabbit hole and have questions. What I'm most hopeful for, at least from the perspective of that, is that there are so many of us here, and we can hopefully reach out to each other for questions and help. So to those of you who are attending that have done this before and are continuing to be stakeholders in this project and help us out, thank you. And generally, thank you for everything you do. I know if there's any follow-up questions, my contact information will be in the follow-up email. And it doesn't look like there's anything else in the chat. So if there isn't, I'll just go ahead and give you 6 minutes of your time for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.